So say you're a value engineer, you're supporting a sales team, maybe like a solution consultant, an account executive, you enter the deal. Tell me about how that looks from like the entry point and maybe how you qualify a deal that you want to invest your time in, and then take us from there.
Yeah. So that can look very different. It can look good and it can look not as good. Unfortunately, in too many cases, an engagement looks like the salesperson, the solution architect have been working with the customer for a while. They've done demos, they've got interested, they've nailed down a list of use cases. They may even have done or be in the process of doing a validation event to validate success criteria. And then they bring a value engineer in to say, hey, but in the imminent future, we're going to be putting a proposal on the customer's desk. So we need to document the value, right? So here's the price tag for the customer and here's the value you're getting. That's a very risky way of engaging because one, you've already invested a ton of time. How many meetings have you had for that opportunity? How much time and resource, and expensive resources, have you invested in doing the validation event? And what if nothing comes from it, right? You're potentially risking wasting a lot of the company's money. And secondly, customer probably knows exactly why you're trying to build a business case, because you're going to put a proposal on their desk and you're going to use this business case to defend the proposal. So if you're a customer, why would you participate in that process, right? So that's a kind of a bad example of engagement. What is a much healthier level of engagement is that the value consultant, the value engineer, or the value content is factored into a deal much, much earlier, as early as possible. That we're factoring in the potential value a customer could get from our solution into the sales conversation as early as possible. I would argue that if you're calling an opportunity qualified, but you don't have a sense of what the business case is, I would argue that's not qualified because, whether the customer is actually going to buy it is a pretty important success criteria, qualification criteria, right? So what's a lot healthier is it's not necessarily a value engineer getting involved. It's at what point do you start talking about value? And that's one thing I've learned over the last year is making sure that even your product marketing content and your proof points and your case studies are not just about the value, but have a very, very clear value message within them is really important, because that means that your sales team, your field team are able to use those proof points and use that to sort of dig into what a customer's value proposition and business case might be much earlier, right? And that's part of the trick here is you want to make that content available to the field so they can self-service and they can run with that. And then the value engineering team is there to kind of supplement, help generate that content, but then come in as a subject matter expert to say, hey, I presented this proof point to this prospect. They really like this idea of influencing metric A, B, and C. Can you help me make a version of that for them? That's a really good kind of engagement model. And the other thing that's really important about that is, I forget the actual metrics here, but it's something like 80% of education of a customer about a solution is done without you even knowing. Plus, will go to your website, they'll do Google searches, look at, Gartner Magic Quadrants, and they will do their own research on a solution before they even talk to you. So value has to be embedded in the content that they see so that they already start to form a perspective of what the value they will get from your solution is. So factoring value in earlier in the sales process, whether that's through generated content, whether that's through some sort of value platform that helps the field have that type of conversation, or if it's a value resource being brought in to help with that conversation, then it'll look a little different. But that's a much healthier and a much more productive way of engaging.
I would agree. We always want to identify the ideal sort of scenario, but we don't often live in the ideal world. So,
right.
But it's always nice to have that North Star that this is what an ideal would look like. Let's try to aim for this. And we can certainly engage in less than ideal circumstances, but let's always be working towards that ideal circumstance. I would say always be value selling, whether or not you have a value engineer team or whether you're engaging with a value engineer team, organizations and executives. By the outcome, that's the value, not necessarily the solution.
Exactly. I was actually talking with another value leader, one of my peers, quite a few months ago now, and we were laughing because he said, my goal is to put myself out of a job. And my goal is to build a value practice and deploy a value platform that is so comprehensive and so easy to use that you don't need a value leader and a value consulting team, that we've put it in the hands of the field and they can sell using what we put together. right? Maybe you never get there, but that's really the perspective. Because the days of having, when I was at BMC, we had dozens of value consultants who would sort of roam the country doing this for customers. But that was a very different world. Software-wise, perpetual license, pretty big deals. You could afford to have a large ecosystem of roles to support the deal. It's very different now where you're looking at probably an annual subscription that's a comparatively lower dollar amount. You can't afford that sort of model. So the self-service and the education and enablement side of it is really, really important.
If you enjoyed that clip, the full episode is available here. Go on, press it.